I was folding laundry in my bedroom when my phone buzzed with a text that made my blood run cold. "Mom, please come get me. Something happened." It was 11:47 p.m., and my 8-year-old daughter Emma was supposed to be sound asleep at her first sleepover at my cousin Jake's house. My hands started shaking as I read the message again. Emma barely knew how to work my old phone. I'd only given it to her for emergencies. The fact that she was texting me in the middle of the night meant something was seriously wrong. I threw on clothes and raced across town, my mind spinning with worst-case scenarios. When I pulled into Jake's driveway, I could see Emma's silhouette in the living room window. She was sitting alone on the couch, still in her pajamas, clutching her stuffed rabbit. The sight of her small frame hunched over like that. It's an image that will haunt me forever. That's when I knew this wasn't just about homesickness or a bad dream. Jake opened the door before I could knock, and his expression told me everything. He looked guilty, defensive, like a teenager caught sneaking in past curfew. "Look, Sarah, it's not as bad as Emma's making it seem," were literally the first words out of his mouth. Not, "Is she okay?" or, "I'm so sorry for worrying you." He was already in damage control mode, which told me exactly how bad this really was. Emma ran to me the moment she saw me, wrapping her arms around my waist and burying her face in my shirt. I could feel her whole body trembling. My usually chatty, giggly daughter was completely silent. She wouldn't even look at Jake or his 11-year-old son, Marcus, who was hovering in the hallway looking uncomfortable. "What happened here tonight?" I asked, my voice deadly calm in that way that mothers master when they're absolutely furious but need to stay in control. Jake started stammering about kids being kids and how Emma was just being sensitive. But what happened next? What I discovered about how my own family had put my child in danger. That changed everything between us forever. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up, because if I don't give you the full picture, you'll think I'm overreacting to some innocent childhood drama. You need to understand who Jake is, who my daughter is, and exactly what kind of harmless fun nearly sent my 8-year-old to the emergency room. Let me back up, because if I don't, you'll think I'm making this up or blowing things out of proportion. My cousin Jake and I grew up together. Our moms are sisters, and we were practically raised as siblings. Jake's always been the golden child of our family. Charming, successful in business, married to a lovely woman named Lisa. On the surface, he seems like the perfect family man with his big house in the suburbs and his honor roll son Marcus. But there's something about Jake that has always bothered me, though I could never quite put my finger on it. He has this way of pushing boundaries, especially with kids, under the guise of toughening them up or teaching them resilience. Our family has always laughed off his intensity as just Jake being Jake. He means well, my aunt would say whenever someone raised concerns about his parenting style or the way he interacted with the younger cousins. My daughter Emma is the complete opposite of Marcus. Where he's outgoing and confident, she's thoughtful and cautious. She's incredibly creative, always drawing or making up elaborate stories for her toys. But she's also sensitive and needs time to warm up in social situations. She's never been the kind of kid to take physical risks or engage in rough play. That's not a flaw. That's just who she is. I've spent 8 years nurturing her gentle spirit and teaching her that her sensitivity is actually a strength. The sleepover had been planned for weeks. Marcus had been begging for Emma to come over, and Jake kept insisting it would be good for her to spend time with her cousin. "She needs to learn to be more independent," he'd say whenever the topic came up. Lisa seemed excited about having Emma over, mentioning how much Marcus looked forward to having a playmate. Against my better instincts, and I'll regret ignoring those instincts for the rest of my life, I agreed to let Emma go. The day started normally enough. Emma was nervous but excited, clutching her overnight bag and chattering about the movies they might watch. I dropped her off around 4 p.m., and Jake was all smiles and promises about pizza for dinner and staying up late. Lisa hugged Emma and assured me they'd take good care of her. Everything seemed perfect on the surface. But what I didn't know was that Jake had already planned what he called a character-building exercise for the kids that night. In his twisted mind, my daughter's natural caution was a problem that needed fixing, and he was going to use his own son to help him do it. The full story came out piece by piece over the next few days as Emma felt safe enough to tell me what really happened. It started during dinner when Jake began making comments about how Emma was too careful and needed to live a little. He kept pushing her to try things she wasn't comfortable with, eating spicier pizza, drinking soda even though I'd mentioned she has a sensitive stomach, staying up later than her usual bedtime. Marcus, clearly following his father's lead, started chiming in with comments about how Emma was scared of everything. These weren't the innocent teasing of children playing together. These were calculated attempts to make my daughter feel ashamed of her natural personality. Jake was orchestrating this, egging his son on with approving looks and encouraging laughter. The situation escalated after Lisa went to bed around 10 p.m. That's when Jake's true colors came out. He announced that they were going to play a bravery game in the backyard. Despite Emma's obvious reluctance, Jake insisted it would be fun and that she just needed to trust him. The game involved climbing onto their shed roof and jumping down onto what Jake claimed was a perfectly safe pile of leaves. "Don't be a baby," Marcus taunted when Emma hesitated at the base of the ladder Jake had positioned against the shed. But these weren't just words from an 11-year-old boy. This was clearly a phrase he'd learned from his father, delivered with the same dismissive tone Jake used whenever someone expressed concern about his ideas. Emma told me she looked to Jake for reassurance, hoping the adult would step in and say this was too dangerous. Instead, Jake crossed his arms and nodded approvingly at his son. "Marcus is right, Emma. You can't be afraid of everything your whole life. Sometimes you just have to take a leap." My 8-year-old daughter, desperate to prove she wasn't a baby, and wanting desperately to fit in with her cousins, climbed that ladder. She later told me her hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip the rungs. When she got to the top of the shed, a good 8 feet off the ground, she looked down at the pile of leaves and started crying. They looked so much smaller from up there, and she could see patches of concrete showing through. That's when Marcus delivered the line that still makes me see red. "What are you waiting for? Are you going to be a scaredy cat forever?" And Jake, the adult, the father, the man I trusted with my child's safety, actually started a countdown. 10, 9, 8. Emma jumped because she was more afraid of disappointing them than she was of getting hurt. She landed hard on her left ankle, missed most of the leaf pile, and scraped her palms on the concrete. The pain was immediate and severe, but when she started crying, Jake's first response wasn't concern. It was annoyance. "Come on, Emma, you're fine. It's just a little scratch. Big girls don't cry over nothing." Meanwhile, my daughter was sitting on cold concrete in the dark, her ankle swelling and her hands bleeding, being told by her adult cousin that her pain wasn't valid. That's when Emma knew she needed to call me. This didn't come out of nowhere, though it took me years to connect all the dots. Growing up, Jake had always been the one pushing boundaries at family gatherings. He was the cousin who would tickle younger kids until they cried and then act like they were being overdramatic. He was the teenager who thought it was hilarious to jump out and scare the little ones, even when they asked him to stop. Our grandmother used to make excuses for him. "He's just energetic. Boys will be boys." Our aunts would laugh it off. At least he's not sitting inside playing video games all day. The family narrative was that Jake was helping make the younger cousins tougher and more resilient. Anyone who complained was labeled as too sensitive. I remember being about 12 when Jake, then 16, convinced me to slide down the steep hill behind our grandparents' house on a piece of cardboard. I ended up with road rash down my entire leg and a sprained wrist. When I cried, Jake told me I was being a drama queen. When my mom got upset, the family rallied around Jake, insisting he hadn't meant for me to get hurt and that these things happen when kids play. Even as an adult, Jake maintained this pattern. At family barbecues, he'd encourage the kids to engage in increasingly risky behavior while the parents weren't watching. Pool games that were too rough, climbing trees that were too high, dares that were too dangerous. When someone got hurt, it was always treated as an accident, and Jake would act wounded that anyone would question his judgment. Last summer at a family reunion, I watched him pressure my nephew into eating a jalapeno pepper, promising it wasn't that hot. The kid was in tears, gulping down milk, while Jake laughed and said he was building character. When my sister got upset, Jake acted like she was overprotective and ruining everyone's fun. I should have seen the pattern. I should have recognized that Jake's idea of helping kids involved deliberately putting them in situations where they were uncomfortable or unsafe. I should have realized that his definition of character building was actually just bullying disguised as mentorship. Worst part is that Jake genuinely believes he's doing these kids a favor. In his mind, he's the fun adult who isn't afraid to let kids take risks. He sees parents like me as overprotective helicopters who are raising weak, fearful children. He thinks he's providing a necessary counterbalance to our coddling. But what he was really doing was teaching children that their instincts don't matter, that adults' approval is worth more than their own safety, and that expressing fear or discomfort makes them weak. He was systematically undermining their ability to trust their own judgment and set healthy boundaries. That night in his backyard, Emma learned all of these lessons at once. And I realized that my family's long history of enabling Jake's behavior had put my daughter directly in harm's way. The drive home that night was silent, except for Emma's occasional sniffles. I knew better than to bombard her with questions while she was still scared and hurt. Instead, I focused on getting her to the emergency room to have her ankle and hands looked at. The x-rays showed a mild sprain and some deep scrapes, but thankfully nothing was broken. While we waited for the doctor, Emma gradually opened up about what had happened. With each detail she shared, I felt my anger growing. Not the hot, explosive kind that makes you do stupid things, but the cold, calculated fury that makes you very, very dangerous to whoever hurt your child. The first thing I did was document everything. Photos of Emma's injuries, screenshots of the text messages, a detailed written account of everything she told me while it was fresh in her memory. I've worked in legal administration for 15 years, and I know the importance of creating a paper trail when someone's judgment and character are called into question. Monday morning, I called Emma's pediatrician and scheduled an appointment. I wanted a medical professional to examine her injuries and document them officially. Dr. Martinez was appalled when I explained what had happened. An 8-year-old jumping from a shed roof onto concrete? That's not normal play, Sarah. That's dangerous and inappropriate. She referred me to a family counselor who specializes in helping children process traumatic experiences. Emma may seem fine now, Dr. Martinez warned, but being pressured into dangerous behavior by trusted adults can have lasting psychological effects. She needs to understand that what happened to her wasn't her fault. Next, I consulted with a family law attorney, not because I was planning to sue Jake, but because I needed to understand my options and rights. The attorney confirmed what I already suspected. Jake's behavior could potentially be classified as child endangerment, and I had every right to restrict his access to Emma and to demand changes in how family gatherings were supervised. But the most important conversation I had was with my sister Rebecca, who has always been the voice of reason in our family. When I told her what happened, she was quiet for a long moment before saying, "I'm not surprised. I've been worried about Jake's judgment with kids for years, but no one wants to hear it because he's so charming." Rebecca helped me realize that I wasn't just protecting Emma. I was potentially protecting every child in our extended family. Jake's behavior was escalating, and someone needed to hold him accountable before a child got seriously injured or worse. Together, we developed a strategy. Rather than confronting Jake privately, where he could minimize what happened and control the narrative, we were going to address this at the next family gathering where witnesses could see his reaction and hear his justification for endangering my daughter. The opportunity came 2 weeks later at my aunt's birthday party. Jake arrived acting like nothing had happened, giving me his usual charming smile and asking how Emma was doing after her little tumble. He actually used those words. Little tumble. As if my daughter hadn't been pressured into jumping off a roof by a grown man. I waited until most of the family was gathered in the living room before I stood up and asked for everyone's attention. Jake's face immediately changed when he realized I was about to speak. The guilty look was back, that same expression I'd seen when he opened his door that night. "I need to tell you all about what happened at Jake's house 2 weeks ago," I began, my voice steady and clear, "so that everyone understands why Emma won't be attending any more unsupervised activities at his home." The room went silent. Jake tried to interrupt. "Sarah, we already talked about this. It was just an accident." "No," I cut him off. "We didn't talk about this. You made excuses, and I listened while I focused on getting my injured daughter medical attention. Now it's my turn to talk." I laid out exactly what happened, using Emma's own words to describe how she was taunted, pressured, and ultimately coerced into jumping from a dangerous height. I described her injuries and shared what her pediatrician had said about the inappropriateness of the situation. Jake's response was everything I expected and worse. He immediately went into victim mode, claiming I was making a mountain out of a molehill and destroying family relationships over a simple accident. He insisted he was just trying to help Emma overcome her fears and build confidence. Character building? I asked, my voice getting sharper. You call pressuring an 8-year-old into jumping off a roof character building? You call allowing your son to bully my daughter into doing something dangerous character building? That's when Marcus, who had been listening from the hallway, spoke up in a small voice. Dad told me to call her a baby if she wouldn't jump. He said girls need to learn to be braver. The room erupted. My aunt, Jake's own mother, turned to stare at her son with an expression of complete shock. Several other family members started talking at once, their voices ranging from confused to angry. But Jake's response was the most telling of all. Instead of showing remorse or taking responsibility, he doubled down. He accused me of poisoning Emma against him and teaching her to be a victim. He claimed that kids these days are too soft and that someone needs to prepare them for the real world. He actually said that Emma should thank him for the lesson in courage. That's when I delivered the line I'd been rehearsing for 2 weeks. Jake, the only lesson you taught my daughter is that the adults she trusts might hurt her and then blame her for being hurt. That's not character building. That's abuse. The word hung in the air like a bomb. Jake's face went white, then red, then white again. He started sputtering about how I couldn't use that word, how I was being dramatic, how I was going to ruin his reputation over nothing. Your reputation, I said quietly, is something you should have thought about before you endangered my child. Jake's immediate reaction was to try to turn the family against me. Within hours of the confrontation, he was calling relatives with his version of events, painting me as an overprotective mother who was destroying family unity over a harmless accident. He claimed Emma wasn't really hurt and that I was using her to get attention and sympathy. But his strategy backfired spectacularly. My Aunt Rebecca had already spoken to several family members about her own concerns regarding Jake's behavior with children. Other parents started sharing their own stories, incidents they had previously dismissed as Jake being Jake, but now recognized as a troubling pattern. My cousin Lisa called me 3 days after the party. She was crying as she apologized for not protecting Emma that night. I went to bed early because I was tired, but honestly, I was also uncomfortable with how intense Jake was getting with the kids. I should have stayed up. I should have intervened. She revealed that she'd been having her own concerns about Jake's parenting methods and his interactions with Marcus's friends. He's been getting more aggressive about toughening up Marcus, and some of the other parents have mentioned feeling uncomfortable with his supervision style. The most validating call came from Dr. Martinez's office. The family counselor Emma had been seeing wanted to document the incident for potential future reference. This type of coercive behavior toward children often escalates, she explained. Having official documentation protects not just Emma, but other children who might be exposed to this pattern. Jake tried to retaliate by excluding Emma and me from family events, but that plan also backfired. My aunt, his own mother, made it clear that if we weren't welcome, she wouldn't be attending either. Other family members followed suit, and suddenly Jake found himself isolated rather than supported. The final blow to his victim narrative came when Marcus started acting out at school. His teacher called Lisa to report that he'd been pressuring younger children into dangerous playground behavior and using the exact same taunting language his father had taught him. When confronted, Marcus broke down and admitted he didn't like making other kids scared, but his dad said it was how you help people be stronger. Lisa enrolled both herself and Marcus in family counseling and started setting firm boundaries about Jake's character-building methods. She also reached out to apologize to Emma directly, bringing her a small gift and promising that nothing like that would ever happen again in their home. It's been 6 months since that night, and Emma is doing well. The family counseling helped her understand that what happened wasn't her fault and that her natural caution isn't something to be ashamed of. She's learned to trust her instincts, again, and to speak up when adults ask her to do things that make her uncomfortable. Jake has never apologized. He continues to maintain that he did nothing wrong and that our family is being unfair to him. However, he's noticeably changed his behavior at family gatherings. No more unsupervised games with the children, No more pushing kids beyond their comfort zones. Whether this is genuine growth or just fear of further consequences, I don't really care as long as the children are safe. The incident has actually strengthened our family in unexpected ways. We've had honest conversations about boundary setting and child protection that were long overdue. Other parents have become more aware of supervision issues and more willing to speak up when they see concerning behavior. Emma has found her voice in ways I never expected. She's become something of a protector for younger or more timid children, always making sure they know it's okay to say no when they're uncomfortable. She's learned that real bravery isn't about taking unnecessary risks. It's about standing up for yourself and others when something isn't right. The most important lesson from all of this is that family relationships don't excuse harmful behavior. Love doesn't mean accepting abuse, and keeping peace isn't worth sacrificing our children's safety. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is set firm boundaries and enforce consequences, even when it's uncomfortable or causes conflict. I still believe in the importance of letting children take age-appropriate risks and build confidence through new experiences. But there's a world of difference between supporting a child through a challenge they're ready for and pressuring them into dangerous situations for the entertainment or satisfaction of adults. Emma knows she can trust me to protect her, even from family members, even when it's difficult or complicated. That trust is worth more than any relationship I might have damaged by standing up for her safety. What would you have done in this situation? Have you ever had to choose between keeping family peace and protecting your child? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below.